Hi guys, and welcome to Heidi's Fish Tank. First, let's address the area where I'm filming. I film in the weirdest places, and it's just wherever I can because I do have 2 children. So if you hear my kids playing, sorry, it's just the way it is. But I wanted to talk a little bit about my worst day in fish keeping in recent history, which happened this week, actually. It was really, really awful, and I learned a very valuable lesson that I should have known, which is always quarantine your fish. Always quarantine your fish. So I'm going to tell a little bit of a story, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about quarantine and treatment for fish. I have a 20-gallon long community tank. I actually have a lot of other fish tanks as well, and my community tank is a freshwater tank. I also have a saltwater tank, and I have some other stuff like goldfish and that kind of thing. So in my community tank, I had my betta, which my betta is the thing that got me right back into fish keeping. I've fish kept for 25 years. Basically, as long as I can remember, I had fish, minus a short period of time in the middle there where we did not have some form of fish tank in our house. But this is the first time that I've really gotten into it, learned about things like the nitrogen cycle. If you're having trouble with your fish dying, learn about the nitrogen cycle. That's the most important thing that you can learn about fish keeping is the nitrogen cycle. I really need to film a video about it, but other things keep coming up. So, in my saltwater tanks, I quarantine all my fish, which means that when my fish come in, they go into a separate tank and they stay there for an extended period of time until they are cleared of disease, and then they go in my main tank. Sometimes when people do quarantine, they treat their fish, and sometimes when people do quarantine, they don't treat their fish in terms of medication and stuff, and just kind of watch and observe. Personally, with my saltwater fish, I typically treat. Them because I want to make sure, I really don't want any disease getting into my saltwater tank. Those fish are just much more delicate. Now, really, you should quarantine with any fish you have at all. Any fish that you have at all. Oh, I'm sorry, I was talking about my betta, so let's go back. So I got my daughter a betta fish several months ago. I guess it was like in October. I bought her this betta, and at the time we were daily vlogging, and so a bunch of people started commenting and saying his tank isn't adequate. The recommendations for betta keeping now is different than it was when I was a kid keeping bettas. So all that is to say, we ended up upgrading the betta, and eventually my betta led to all these other tanks. So I did several things wrong in this situation. The first thing that I did wrong is I bought my fish from Petco. Now, Petco gets a bad rap, and I've actually had pretty good luck with Petco fish in my experience, in my recent experience. When I was a kid, we killed all kinds of fish, but that was because we didn't understand the nitrogen cycle. But I've had very good luck with Petco fish, and that's partially because my Petco is usually pretty good, and also because I quarantine any saltwater fish that I get from Petco. So my local fish store that I normally buy fish from was out of false Julie Corey's, which I wanted to extend my school a little bit. I felt like my school was a little small and my 20-gallon long. So I was gonna go to the local fish store. They were all out, so I went to Petco, which is across the street from the local fish store, and I bought a couple of false Julie Corey cats. And that was my first mistake. There's a lot of disease often in Petco fish. It's not Petco's fault. It's just when you have a huge system like that, where you have so many fish coming in and it's a corporate level, it's really hard to quarantine every single thing that comes in and to prevent disease. So when he came in, I noticed after a couple days, his eyes were a little cloudy and his gills were looking a little bit red. So I did a little bit of research, and I thought, well, his cloudy eyes, maybe he's got a little bit of trouble with ammonia. My tank is well established. It's been through the nitrogen cycle, which means it doesn't have any ammonia in it. But I know a lot of times shipping can cause ammonia buildup in their bags, and also sometimes they do have ammonia buildup in Petco tanks. So I was like, okay, I'm going to observe him and just see if fresh water, like good water quality, helps him. So that was one day. And then the next day I come out, and one of my Rasboras is not doing well. So I scooped the reservoir out and I put it in quarantine like I should have done with the Cory cat in the first place. And within an hour, the reservoir is dead. Then I was like, oh no, this is not good. So I tested my water, which you always want to test your water, and my ammonia was 0. My nitrates was 10 parts per million, which is actually really good. But my nitrites were a little bit higher. Now the nitrites are the second part of your nitrogen cycle, and in a well-established tank, your nitrites should be 0. Now my nitrites have been reading 0 for months in this tank, so I assumed that what happened is that there was a decaying fish in there, because sometimes if you have a dead fish hanging out, it can make you go back into a cycle. So I looked around and I found that false Julie Cory cat dead. So I scooped it out and I did a 50% water change. And that was like a couple hours after the reservoir had died. I did a 50% water change, and then I kind of observed. An hour later, one of my cardinal tetras was not looking good at all either. So I dosed with some API General Cure, because I thought at the time that it looked like velvet. I've actually talked to some other people, and now I'm not sure that it was velvet. I think it was some other kind of parasite, but it was not ick, which is usually the illness that fish get, but it wasn't ick. So I treated with some General Cure and kind of watched. But within an hour of treating with General Cure, I had a very sick looking Endler, another dead Rasbora, and my betta, which is my prize fish. It's the fish that started this all. It's my kid's fish, flounder, was laying up against the filter. Now, bettas, if you don't know, don't like a ton of strong filtration, but the filter was buffered, so normally he does fine, and actually he does very, very well in a community tank if it's large enough with enough plants with enough fish. I had tried him in a 10-gallon tank, in a community tank, and it didn't work. So then I moved him into a 3.5-gallon tank all by himself, and he was getting very stressed out and biting his tail. So I talked to actually Cory from Aquarium Co-op. If you are not subscribed to his channel, check it out. It is so helpful. And Cory suggested sometimes when a betta is tail biting, they actually will do better in a community tank because they'll have some stuff to chase, as long as it's planted well enough and you're prepared to move him if it is a problem. So by that time I had the 20-gallon long, and I decided to go ahead and try him in the 20-gallon long, and he had been doing fabulous. He absolutely thrived in that tank. His tail grew back, he stopped biting. I've never seen him aggressive towards any of the fish in that tank. Anyways, the fact that he was kind of laying up against the filter did not bode well. So I took him out and I put him into a different quarantine tank that I had. And this is the thing that kills me, is I had tanks set up for quarantine. I just was lazy and chose not to quarantine. I think all of us know that we should quarantine, but none of us think anything bad is going to happen to us. So I'm sure a bunch of people in the comments are going to be like, you knew and you should have done it and you're a bad fish keeper. And I am, and you're right, and I'm sorry. But valuable lesson learned. Anyway, I put him in a 5.5-gallon quarantine tank with a sponge filter, which was much more gentle for him. And I went to bed, and then the next morning I woke up to a dead Endler in my main tank, a dead assassin snail, which actually I think was from the General Cure. I don't think it's invert safe actually. And my betta had died, which sucks. It sucks so much, because that betta, I was like, I feel like I gave you everything. And I also feel a little bit guilty, because I'm like, if I had left him in the 3.5-gallon, he'd probably still be alive, because he wouldn't have been exposed to that Cory cat. But I do think that the community tank was good for that particular betta. Not every betta does well in a community tank, although I've always had luck with it. But the ultimate lesson is quarantine your fish. And if you say you have like a 10-gallon tank and that's the only tank that you have, then anytime you get a new fish, first off, you're not going to have a ton of fish in that tank. But anytime you get a new fish, treat the whole tank with a medication. Or you can take something like literally like a bucket, and all you need is a sponge filter, and depending on the temperature, maybe a heater. My house doesn't really need heaters. We keep the house at like 79 degrees because I live in Arizona. But it doesn't have to be a huge fancy setup. But the thing is if I had quarantined that fish, I might have ended up with a dead Cory cat, maybe. But I definitely would not have ended up with a dead cardinal tetra, 2 dead rasboras, a dead endler, a dead assassin snail, and a dead betta, all in the course of 24 hours. It's been a couple of days since I started treating with the general cure in the entire tank, and everyone has survived since then. But I did learn a valuable lesson, and I feel really, really awful. So that has been kind of my worst day in fish keeping in a while. I didn't really want to tell you guys. Nobody wants to tell you guys because you get judged on the internet for this kind of thing. And of course, it's like 2 days after I made this channel, I was like, oh, I've been really successful with these fish tanks for a while, and I'm excited about this and I want to share it. And then like 2 days later, I have not a complete crash, but a pretty good tank crash. So the moral of the story is I will only be buying from local fish stores that I trust from now on. I will be quarantining all of my fish as they come in, regardless of whether they're freshwater or saltwater. And everyone makes mistakes. I do feel really, really awful. My daughter, she actually took it really well. She woke up the next day and was like, where's Flounder? I was like, he died. Because I don't believe in lying to kids about that kind of thing. I know that a lot of parents would just go out and get a new betta and not tell them, but I think that there's a valuable lesson to be learned. I said, he died because mommy accidentally put a sick fish in there. And she said, oh, okay. Can I get a new fish? And I don't think that fish are animals. And I don't think the fact that they are affordable and easy to replace is a good reason to not take proper care of them. I actually feel really, really awful. So, lesson learned, quarantine your fish. Anyways, that is my story. I really didn't want to share it with you guys, so I hope that you all are going to be gentle with me in the comments. I promise that from now on I will be quarantining any new fish that I add to my tank, and I'm not going to be adding anything until I feel that the tank is completely clear of disease. Let me know down in the comments what is some of your biggest fish keeping mistakes. I'd love to hear it. And if you guys are more experienced fish keepers, I would love to hear a little bit about what your quarantine process looks like for you. So thank you so much for watching. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell next to the subscribe button. That helps me out a lot. And I will talk to you all soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.